Hi, everyone. My name is Lindsay Pajo. I work for Cornell Cooperative Extension. Um, this is the Regenerative Agritourism webinar that we're going to be having for this quarter through the Global Agritourism Network. I'm here with my colleague, Cherise Adensall from the Sunshine Coast. First, I want to start off by sharing this new online platform that we have for the Regenerative Agritourism Committee for the Global Agritourism Network. Okay. We just launched this last week. It's our Regenerative Agritourism Committee platform. It's where we're going to be able to share information about what is happening within the committee, and it's also going to be a way for committee members to be engaged on an ongoing process within the committee. Within the platform, there is ability to chat with committee members privately for discussion, potentially a regenerative agritourism committee course that we might be developing, case studies, upcoming regenerative agritourism webinars, and then past committee meetings. And then we're going to continue to build out the space. Sharice and I are still learning the platform, so you just have to be patient with us. Right now, we have 83 people that have signed up for this online platform, and we're really excited about that. We wanted to share this short video. Sharice, do you want to explain it a little bit? It's
Thanks,
called
Lindsay. It feels strange not being able to see anyone. I can't see any of our attendees.
Yeah.
Hi, everybody. My name's Cherise Adensall. I'm presenting today on the Agritourism and Gastronomy Verification Program that's been developed as part of a research project funded by the Australian Centre for International Agricultural Research, and the project's through the University of Sunshine Coast. We've got many partners as well, and we've been developing this verification program in Vanuatu as a case study, and we're now working with regional organisations to take this out to Pacific member countries throughout the South Pacific. So we've got a little preview here. The full documentary is actually being launched today, but this is to show an example of some of the work we've been doing in Vanuatu through the ACR funded projects and supported by the Vanuatu government and the not-for-profit Regenerative Vanuatu. And it just gives you a nice little glimpse into some of the fantastic positive change we're seeing from implementing regenerative agritourism and gastronomy in the islands of Vanuatu. So I hope you enjoy the preview. And we'll be putting the full documentary and preview up on the platform this week. So you'll be able to watch the 20-minute documentary. And just a big thank you to Damon Gamal from Regen Studios, who created this beautiful documentary for us. So enjoy. No volume, Lindsay.
Okay, I think it's because I had my volume muted.
With the old model of tourism, it's always about filling beds, seats, planes, encouraging locals to be workers, waiter, housekeeping, gardener, pushers to try and be like someone that we are not. If we use our silence as an measure of confidence in their vision for us. And I think I've had enough of that.
That is rolling out across the Pacific is one of the most exciting regenerative initiatives in the world right now. A model that prioritises the well-being of local people and natural treasures while offering a transformative experience for the visitor.
It's less invasive for the communities. It's about
colonization has a lot to do with shaming the local culture. By them seeing real emotional reaction from visitors gives them happiness in that what we have to offer is really good. We are happy and the participants are happy. good thing with this type of tourism is it offers good, meaningful experiences and for tourists. You get grounded.
It's flipping tourism to be more around connection, experiences, and learning instead of just fun, sea, beach type of tourism.
It's about reconnecting with our land, with our Vanua, with our nature.
Okay, I'm going to stop sharing and let Charisse share her screen. We will be opening up for question and answers at the end of the webinar, so please feel free to put questions in the Q&A in the chat. But I'm going to turn this over to Charisse, and thanks you guys for joining.
Thanks, Lindsay. Yeah, so if you'd like to see the preview, 2-minute preview, or the full length 20-minute documentary, sign up to the platform, Regenerative Agritourism Committee platform, and that will be up this week. The full documentary really does start to showcase the power of regenerative agritourism and gastronomy in restoring pride in the food culture, and I'll go into that a bit today. While the verification program for agritourism and gastronomy has been developed for the Pacific, I'm presenting on Vanuatu as a case study today, as this is where the in-depth research has taken place through ACR. So the not-for-profit Regenerative Vanua, it's registered in Vanuatu, but it actually acts on 4 Vanuas throughout the Pacific, and I'll go into explanation more into the term Vanua if you're unfamiliar with this term. So just to quickly go over the Regenerative Vanua board, it's actually an international board of members throughout the South Pacific. And these people are key players in the regenerative movement. So they're also doing their own advocacy work throughout their own organisations, and they're bringing in a wealth of knowledge together for the board. So the Regenerative Vanua board is really strong and well informed. The Regenerative Vanua also has an alliance of organisations that align with the value systems of the not-for-profit Regenerative Vanua, and these are located throughout the South Pacific and Australia, and it's only growing. So if you have an interest as an organisation to collaborate with Regenerative Vanua, contact through the socials. There's a QR code at the end of this presentation, and regenerativevanua.org, and talk about your organisation and see if you'd like to be a member of the Alliance. So GAN's role in the South Pacific at the moment, they have a actual committee for the South Pacific, but they call themselves the Pacifica Regenerative Agritourism Network. So this committee for the South Pacific made a decision that they would like to focus on regenerative agritourism as opposed to agritourism as the strategy for engaging farmers throughout the Pacific in tourism. And there's 21 Pacific member countries in this network. They are an information conduit back to the global agritourism network. Regenerative Vanua has been appointed as the secretariat for the Pacifica Regenerative Agritourism Network, and the office is located in Vanuatu. And they offer services for administration for the network, as it's a voluntary network. The Regenerative Agritourism Committee is co-funded by myself and Lindsay, and we've received some funding from Regenerative Vanua to develop the platform for our members, and we're piloting this approach at the moment to see if it's an engagement method that's effective for engaging our Regenerative Agritourism Committee members. And we really hope that people are really active in giving feedback and suggestions on how they would want the platform to look and grow. We want this to be a place of sharing and collaboration. So yeah, we're really looking forward to it getting bigger and better. So just to go over the term Vanua, this term is actually used throughout the South Pacific Islands. It's got different spelling and pronunciations, although the meaning is relatively the same. So Vanua is difficult to translate into a Western perspective, but it's talking about a place, and it provides a cohesive sense of identity, belonging to this place, and it refers to all life, not just people. Vanua shapes the way they exist within this place and how they operate across time. It's informed by ancestral knowledge, but it also considers future generations. So every Vanua throughout the South Pacific has very unique cultures, languages, even many of different languages and ways of being. So during COVID, the South Pacific was very dependent on tourism during that time, and when the borders closed, it hit pretty hard. But what we saw during this time is what we call a return to Vanua. So they described this as their plan B. So people that were dependent on the tourism industry, particularly in the urban areas, returned to their Vanuas throughout the islands as a coping strategy. And one of these Vanuas is located in the south of Vanuatu called Mystery Island. And prior to the borders closing, it was actually receiving up to 30,000 cruise tourists a month. Interesting, it also had the highest rates of NCDs in the country because people weren't farming or growing their own food, and much of the income they made from tourism went to purchasing imported food, a lot of it unhealthy. So everyone thought during COVID that this Vanua would really suffer. And that was the perception without the tourism cruise ships coming. And it was quite interesting in the local paper here, the chairman of the Unitarian Council of Chiefs that looks over Mystery Island stated, with the current restrictions of travel due to COVID-19, not only have our people returned to the land to plant their gardens, but they've also built their own market house, women are selling fresh greens, and the men are harvesting sandalwood. The current lockdown has not affected our people. In fact, it's motivated them to tap into resilience with a plan B. So this was a really interesting time for research in the Pacific because it wasn't just in Vanuatu. We were seeing this occurring throughout the Pacific, and Regina Shevins published a fantastic paper with her colleague in Fiji, and it talks more in detail about this and their experience. So what we like to say is Vanuas are not destinations, and this can apply to rural regions, communities globally. We see what happens when a community or place becomes a destination. When it does, the priority of the tourism industry outweighs the locals. There's the interesting saying, tourism's like a fire, you can cook your dinner on it, but if you're not careful, it'll burn your house down, and it can burn your community down. This is really when industrial models of tourism are applied, and they're more destructive when they hit regional or rural areas. So examples of industrial models of tourism are private island cruise models, and unfortunately this model of tourism has just entered the South Pacific in Vanuatu, with Royal Caribbean purchasing a large property on Lelepa Island to develop a private island cruise model. What we call this is just an extension of the cruise ship. I'll go into more detail about enclave tourism soon. We also see beach resorts and holiday homes. They're often located on the coastal regions, and they'll block off access to locals to the coast. Even where I live in Port Vila, I can no longer access the coastline due to all of the holiday houses. But they put their cement walls all the way down to the reef and often have their own private wharf. There's also a pricing out of locals from the tourism industry, and it was really interesting during COVID. We saw the Vanuatu Tourism Office do a domestic tourism campaign and really calling on the locals to support the tourism industry. And they did because the prices had dropped down, and they were being more welcoming to the local population. But unfortunately, once the tourism tap turned back on, what we saw is the prices increased so much many of the local population couldn't afford to do tourism in their own countries. And we also saw direct refusal of Indigenous peoples from hotels and resorts, and even just families wanting to go have lunch or a swim being refused entry. We also see higher leakage with imported, cheap, low quality and highly processed food. A very Western food is often consumed in the tourism industry in the South Pacific. So enclave tourism, it's really designed to capture the tourist from the minute they leave their home until returning. And Cruise does an exceptional job at this. So it's to facilitate the tourist expenditures within the company's enclave, and it limits their interaction with local communities and resources. So we've actually seen this type of tourism burn a whole regional community down, and I know back in Australia where I am from, near Byron Bay, this has definitely been the occurrence there. So examples of enclave tourism are all-inclusive resorts where everything's paid for. You don't go and eat anywhere else. You don't do all the tours come to you. All the cultural activities are done within the compound. Gated resort communities, private cruise and islands, as I described before, and private beaches, which are really common in the South Pacific as well. So what is a key concern is that agritourism in the South Pacific is actually at risk of being hijacked by enclave tourism. So agritourism's purpose was to actually take people out to rural areas to connect with the local food and farming systems and to diversify income for farmers, particularly smallholder farmers that are struggling to compete in as agriculture becomes more corporatized. But what we've seen here in Fiji is an example of the Sheraton, where they've developed a large agritourism farm-to-table experience. So instead of the visitor leaving the resort for the day to go out and see Indigenous-run farms and meet people and learn about the farming culture, they stay within the compound and experience this. So for us, it's really important to have standards and definitions to say this is actually not agritourism. So we've been following the path of agritourism into the South Pacific since 2016, and it was actually held at a resort in Fiji. And you'll see here in the paper, and it says Agritourism Week, a push to include more local produce in hotels. So the event was really kidnapped by the mass industrial tourism industry. This is not agritourism. If the person hasn't left the enclave tourism and headed out to the rural regions and actually had experiences with real farmers, they're not doing agritourism. So we're also, as we saw before, it's being commercialized in the Pacific because it's growing in popularity so much. And this is driven by industry players that do not want the tourist to leave the compound. We see agritourism as a diversification strategy to support farmers to improve their livelihoods and well-being. It helps to actually address enclave tourism and spread the tourism benefits more widely. It supports visitors to build a deeper connection and respect for local farming and food culture. And we stress that tourism is not the primary activity, so it should not replace farming, and we don't want to impact on food security as agritourism gains in popularity. So we've developed a framework as part of the research project that led to the verification program. And it encompasses many concepts to get to regenerative agritourism. So we actually take principles from the regenerative tourism literature, which is actually quite recent. It's only been published for a few years now. We acknowledge that Indigenous knowledge systems globally actually inform a regenerative approach. It encompasses regenerative agriculture, of course, as a core. And it also integrates the principles of agroecology, particularly around land and food sovereignty and the political ecology aspects of agroecology. And of course, for agritourism operators that are serving food, it incorporates regenerative gastronomy and links very neatly to that concept. So it's really important as we start to see sustainability and regenerative used interchangeably to acknowledge that they're actually from very different mindsets, and it's important that we don't do this. So sustainability, it really was brought in to manage the impact of the industrial extractive model in agriculture, tourism, and all the sectors. Regenerative is actually more based on pre-industrial mindsets, and it's more about human to human and human to nature connection. It looks for locally attuned solutions, and it has a mindset of learning from living systems. So for you to be in a regenerative mindset, you literally have to shift from a sustainability mindset. It is not a build on from sustainability or an addition. It's a completely different worldview. So why do we need to shift in mindset from sustainable to regenerative? So over on the left here, you'll see photos where in Vanuatu that have actually had very little development assistance, which is really interesting and confronting as someone that works in the development space. And on the right, this is where you've got a lot of development projects, you've got a lot of tourism, and you've got commercial agriculture. And unfortunately, when we look at the industrial mindset, which is causing that shift, they're based on things that actually increase GDP. And this is problematic in actually trying to address when it comes to priority for many governments is to actually increase GDP. But when we look at things that increase GDP, it's water that's so polluted that tourists have to buy water, dependency on imported food and supermarkets gouging on prices, farming relying on external inputs, pesticides, fertilizers, tractors, clearing land for monoculture export, chronic illness and sales of pharmaceuticals, credit card debt, fast fashion, weapons, war, land alienation, and leasing of land. Unfortunately, this transition has led to serious NCDs in the South Pacific. In Vanuatu, for example, we have 2 amputations a week in the hospital. Unfortunately, on the left, for government, things that decrease GDP are actually things that increase livelihoods. So clean, accessible water, subsistence farming, supplying your own community and your households with food, backyard gardens in urban areas, regenerative and traditional gardening systems with little inputs, sharing of seeds, bartering of goods, the informal economy, healthy eating, locally sourced food, staying fit and healthy and having time to do this, peace, localization and regeneration. These are not things that increase GDP. So within the tourism industry, sustainability is based on industrial individualism, and the needs of the tourism industry often outweigh the needs of Vanua or community or place. It's based on minimization. So terms that are often used is minimizing negative impact, leveraging culture for tourism, which is problematic, encourages, doesn't, encourages is, how do you measure encouragement? Active participation from local communities. It doesn't enforce. Access to basic services. So for regenerative, based on an Indigenous worldview, it's actually, we see it reconnecting and regenerating place. We also feel if the visitor hasn't left that mass industrial model, they haven't participated in regenerative. So it's really important that regenerative doesn't become a marketing tool for the mass industrial model. So regenerative agritourism, we see it as reframing tourism as an opportunity to strengthen and share farming and food culture through regenerative agritourism experiences rather than a commercialized, visitor-centered business operation. This is really important, especially in Indigenous context. My tourism is in Australia, in the remote communities in WA, Western Australia, where I spent time on country. And it was often stated that to do tourism, you have to be 24/7. You always have to be on. And the Aboriginal representatives there would say that the marketing officers and the DMOs would get angry when they cancel a accommodation or trip because of sorry business, because of cultural obligations, and that they were told that they can't do tourism because they have to choose one or the other. And where agritourism, we feel it actually gives, because tourism is not your priority, your agriculture and your communities are. This aligns well with Indigenous worldview that you're not on 24/7. Business is not a priority and your culture and family and community is, but this is a way to actually have something that supports in a culturally empathetic way. It takes place on practicing farms. This is crucial. No fake agritourism. And the farms must be practicing regenerative agriculture. Regenerative agritourism supports a farmer and Vanua-led approach. So the tourism industry does not outweigh the needs of the rural areas. It increases pride in the local food and farming systems and supports land and food sovereignty. And bringing in the aspects of regenerative tourism, it has a transformational potential for both host and guest. So some core principles of regenerative agritourism is experiences based on verified regenerative farms. Agricultural activities predominate agritourist, and it does not impact on food security. So the production of the farm does not go down from participating in tourism. It's educational and transformational. It follows regenerative tourism principles, supports land sovereignty, cultural and community connection, circular systems, and stewardship. So a definition that was put forward through the research is regenerative agritourism is an ecologically and socially inclusive model of agritourism on authentic working farms that are practicing regenerative agriculture. Educational, interactive and transformational experiences are delivered based on the interpretation of regenerative agro-ecosystems which support climate resilience. And we also stress that it's not just for international tourists, it's also used as a knowledge exchange for people between Pacific Islands, but also people within the country to encourage young people to see farming as a career they can be proud of. So regenerative gastronomy links really well to regenerative agritourism, and many regenerative agritourism operations would actually be participating in both when they serve food to guests. So regenerative gastronomy is a culinary philosophy and practice that integrates principles of regenerative agriculture into food preparation and consumption. It emphasizes regeneration, ecosystem health, and the well-being of both people and planet by using ingredients sourced from farming practices that restore soil health, promote biodiversity, sequester carbon, and regenerates environment. And exciting in Vanuatu, Regenerative Vanuatu actually supporting the Vanuatu Gastronomy Committee to be the first region globally to be verified as regenerative. And they've been nominated for the World Gastronomy Awards for 2027 by the Institute of Gastronomy, Arts and Tourism. So they'll be the first region with IGAT to be verified as regenerative. We also see the power of regenerative gastronomy for decolonising the food system and raising the profile of the local food culture. So some core principles of regenerative gastronomy is regenerative sourcing, nutrition integrity. This is really important, not serving people food that will make them sick or is particularly toxic oils or things that are bad for your health, just trying to get taste, MSG, etc. This is about actually giving people food that's good for their body. Waste reduction, biodiversity in cooking to support resilient ecosystems, culture and community connection, circular systems and stewardship. So Regenerative Vanuatu runs off the Regenerative Vanuatu Stewardship Framework. This was developed over 4 years of critical participation research, and this could be applied to any region in the world. We see the Vanuatu concept as really powerful for connecting people to place. So within the framework, we have stewardship of self, and that's really requires what we call shifting mindsets. And often this is a process of unlearning and remembering for Pacific Islanders, their Indigenous knowledge systems. It's directly linked to decolonisation. Stewardship of others through the concept of regenerative intercultural hosting with regenerative agritourism and regenerative gastronomy, where hosts are identified as healers and agents of transformational change. So this is not just a touristic experience and exchange of services. This is something meant to actually support people to join a regenerative journey. Stewardship of nature sees agriculture and land management practices restoring damage done to the Vanuatu. So this is where it differs from sustainability. You are regenerating place, you're repairing and regenerating. And stewardship of place is actually connecting to the spirit of place, to the unobservable entities, so cosmological, genealogical, ancestral and spiritual, and that inform the understandings of that place. And the beautiful slogan that Regenerative Vanuatu uses for this is remembering the past, regenerating the future. And I think that's a really powerful message. So through our Australian Centre for International Agricultural Research, we've actually had 2 projects that have led to this through the University of Sunshine Coast and Australian Centre for Pacific Islands Research. and Regenerative Whanawa, and we won an Island Innovations Award in 2021, which was really exciting for the team. But we've developed Regenerative Agritourism, Gastronomy and Stewardship Verification. So the verification program supports, measures and verifies regenerative practice in agriculture, agritourism, gastronomy and nutrition. And this process supports a collection of invaluable data that can support access to finance for regenerative initiatives. And this is where it differs greatly from sustainable and organic certification. So with sustainability and organics, they have relatively well-defined standards and protocols for certification, and there's an endpoint where you get certified. The dynamic and iterative nature of regeneration makes it harder to assign a fixed level of achievement. This is why we call it verification, that you are on a regenerative journey, not certification. We see regeneration as a journey, not a destination, and you should always be improving place. Therefore, it cannot be certified in the same way. It must show constant improvements, not an end goal. And our standards show an emphasis on process, not the outcome. So we have standards and measuring tools for measuring regenerative agriculture and nature positive landscapes. And this encompasses coastal and ocean landscape as well. We have standards and measuring tools around animal welfare, both wildlife and for farm production. We also have operations of the actual business and infrastructure to ensure that they don't impact place. Then we bring in the tourism side of things with transformational and educational experiences to measure that they are having impact on the person partaking in them. And we have standards around regenerative gastronomy, particularly for agritourism operations that are serving food, but also just for cafes and hotels that are serving local food. And overall, we have measurements for the Whanawa, so the region. So is this business or operation supporting thriving places, regions, land of food sovereignty and food and nutrition security? So we've got an event in Vanuatu actually in July where we'll be presenting the verification program and actually developing supporting policy for the rollout of the verification program in Vanuatu and then throughout the Pacific. We've also started a Regenerative Ambassador Awards that we're piloting in Vanuatu, and we look to take these out to the Pacific as well to encourage people on their regenerative verification journey. So if you're interested in any of this, you can get in touch with Regenerative Whanawa to learn more. So just to sum up, Regenerative Whanawa's primary focus is to give Vanuas and farmers, rural regions, etc., an alternative to entering the mass industrial model of tourism and agriculture. It protects rural regions from mass tourism, so locals' needs come first. Regenerative agritourism gastronomy flips the tourism and agricultural models from extractive to regenerative. Entering a Whanawa is a privilege. Entering your rural region, your community, is a privilege. This changes the narrative from the customer is always right and a sense of entitlement. The experience isn't commodified for entertainment, it's participatory, educational, transformational, and reciprocal. So we like to think that people that are entering these Whanawas share information as well that might support place. And it restores pride in local food and farming systems, supports stewardship of place, of Whanawa, of rural regions, and protects cultural knowledge and custom, and ensures Whanawa and land remains in the hands of custodians or smallholder farmers. So as you can see, this model really can be applied, we feel, anywhere in the world, and we think the South Pacific has an incredible role to play in supporting this mindset shift to regenerative. And there's a role for everyone on this regeneration journey. We see this platform that we've developed and the work that we're doing is about collaboration, not competition. It's not industrial, it's stewardship. And it creates a meaningful paradigm and a meaningful place for people to come and share and support. And to finish off, there's no place for greenwashing regenerative. We have to ensure this does not become a marketing tool for industrial players. So the QR code's there if you'd like to visit our website or learn more or get in touch. And I'm happy to answer questions now and open up the floor. So thank you, Lindsay.
Thanks, Therese. That was amazing. As always, I love watching your presentations. I learned so much. There is one question in the chat. Are there any trainings for those keen and interested in becoming an agritourism specialist? And do we access these trainings, please?
Yes, so we're actually in the development of both trainings, exchange programs we developed last year, and we call them regenerative journeys. And we've got our first journey happening in July, which has actually been booked up by Indigenous youth from Australia and Aotearoa, New Zealand. So they'll be doing the first regenerative journey, and then it will be open to people to be able to go on these regeneration journeys. And really, this is about learning the practices of regenerative thinking. It's about experiencing it by the Indigenous host and taking that back to your place. So our exchange programs will also be opening up. There's one starting in October, so we'll be putting the information up then. And the idea with the platform is Lindsay and I will be developing training as a component of the platform. Once we get the platform actually operational, our plan is to then have a separate component of the platform for training in regenerative agritourism and gastronomy and the verification, etc., if you're interested. So I hope that answers your question.
People can ask questions either in the chat or also live too. So anybody can unmute themselves at this point, just to let everybody know. Let's see. During your experience working with the Indigenous community or residents of Regenerative Vanuatu, where do they perceive the Regenerative Agritourism program? Oops, hard for me to program. What are some of the challenges that are found during the program?
Look, definitely a challenge is accessibility. It's our biggest challenge in the South Pacific. We have inconsistent and unreliable transport to rural areas. And I mean, this is probably globally. Connection to rural areas is often a difficult challenge. So what we try to say to visitors is this is not a quick sun, sea, sand, beach style of experience. You're coming, you put in the effort to get there because it's worth it. And another thing is just unlearning. The biggest challenge has been unlearning. There's been this perceived notion in the South Pacific that the industrial model of tourism is the only model of tourism that they have an option of doing. And so to actually give another option and to reframe it and then teach it has been one of the most challenging things. Is when something's indoctrinated and it's difficult to do that mindset shift. But what we've found the best strategy for that is exchange. So we take people that are interested in having something where they can retain their land sovereignty, but participate in tourism and something that doesn't harm their communities and they can still remain farmers. If they're interested in that approach, we take them to places where this is happening for inspiration. And we find that very powerful.
One of the other comments was, please create training programs for us in African so we can be more relevant.
I've actually I've got a meeting next week with a program looking to do exchange between Africa and the South Pacific funded by Australia. So that's probably on the cards by the sounds of it. So yeah, things are only growing. Things are only growing. And the more people get involved and are active, especially on the platform, then we'll be able to grow them even faster. So yeah, Lindsay and I both really believe so much in this movement. And we're very passionate about it, but we need everyone's help and support. So we look forward to a really active place to share. And especially for people putting ideas for webinars and case studies of the exciting things they're doing in this space.
Does anybody else have some questions that they'd like to ask, either in the chat or live? So I don't think we have any more questions, Charisse.
No worries.
Well, we hope that you guys all join the online platform, but also come to other upcoming Global Agritourism Network webinars. If you go to the Global Agritourism Network webpage, and I'll put that right in the chat. You'll find information about upcoming events, webinars, the upcoming conference in 2026 that's going to be happening in Aberdeen, Scotland. So there's a lot of things happening within the Global Agritourism Network. So please join and be involved.
Thanks, Lindsay, and I look forward to seeing everyone on the platform. And thanks, Sass.